Good morning, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, wherever in the world you're joining in from. Thank you for joining us. Would you mind just putting in the chat if you can hear us clearly and you can see us? And we will give it a couple of minutes to let a few others join in as well. Fabulous. Thank you, everyone. I hope you've got a cup of tea, a glass of wine, something to get yourself comfortable for the next hour as well.
Is it too early for me to have wine at 10 a.m.? It is Bay Area.
Absolutely not. It's 7 o'clock in Amsterdam. Pour yourself a glass.
I like it.
Great. Thanks, Anne Maria. I'm having a beer in Italy. That sounds awesome.
Oh, man, I'm jealous.
I have another one for all of us as well. Cool. We're just a couple more minutes. We still have a few more people to join. Hello from Minnesota, Frida. Thank you for joining. Oh, quite an international crowd. Rotterdam, woohoo.
Slovenia, nice.
Good morning, everybody on the other side of the world. Cool. Okay, I think we can get started. I know people will join as we go, but please continue to use the chat as you're already doing. We love to get as much interaction as we can throughout the session. So just to do some housekeeping, we will answer as many questions as we can when we'll try to do that throughout the webinar, but we'll also take questions live at the end as well, so you can get a chance to speak or ask questions directly to all the speakers. So first of all, thank you very much for joining us, and in and amongst these crazy times that you've made time to join and tune in today. We have a great bunch of panelists here with us, and they're going to introduce themselves very shortly. So let's jump straight into it. I'd just like to, first of all, say a massive shout out to Sapling and Impraise for sponsoring this event and pulling together these fabulous speakers. There will be more content on both companies later, but if you have any questions, please don't forget to ask. And then straight into the speakers. So I'll kick it off. My name is Dash, and I'm the marketing manager here at Impraise. I've been with the company for a couple of years now, and we are very passionate about people and enabling them to be their best selves. So I'll pass it straight on to you, Agata. Would you mind giving a quick update on yourself for the people listening?
Sure. Hi, everyone. It was lovely seeing all the representation from around the world. My name is Agata, and my last name is Zasada. My parents did not realize that my name rhymed. I lead the people and culture function at Bananatag. If you haven't heard about Bananatag, our mission is to make meaningful internal communication easy. We let you collaborate with teammates to create on-brand, targeted, and measurable email communications within your organization. Prior to Bananatag, I worked with some really great brands, which include Spence Diamonds, Hootsuite, Lululemon, and during the 2010 Olympics in all HR functions. That's a little bit about me.
Awesome. That's quite a range of activities that you've had to experience there. Thank you for that. And Jeff, would you mind giving us a quick intro?
Sure. My name is Jeff Diana. I'm formerly the Chief People Officer at Atlassian, where I joined when we were about 250 folks, and had a crazy ride to about 2,200 through our IPO, and just an awesome time hanging with the Aussies and building that business. Prior to that, I was the Chief People Officer at SuccessFactors, and I won't go back too far because it'll make me feel way too old to do all of that. Right now, I spend most of my time in 3 buckets. I do angel investing in HR tech because there's so much good stuff that needs to be built for all of us in the space. I do board and board advisory work, and I do consulting with a few super high growth companies that have all sorts of awesome challenges ahead where maybe the CEO hasn't seen the movie before. So excited to be here today and part of the conversation. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining. Really appreciate it. And you have so much experience that I know that the people on the call are going to get some useful insights. And last but definitely not least, Lisette, would you mind giving us a quick update on you?
Sure, Darsh. Thank you. So my name is Lisette Venema, and I'm currently a customer success manager at Impraise. Previously, I've worked at Booking.com, where I joined as when we had about 100 people, and I left when we had 12,000. So that was quite the scale up. After that, I joined KataWiki, also scaling fast. And I've always worked in roles where I was passionate about developing people as a trainer, but also as an interim manager to help underperforming teams to become high-performing teams.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you to all the speakers. And if you have any questions, as I said, guys, in the chat, and we'll pick them up as we go. So moving straight on to the next slide, the topic that we're choosing to discuss today is obviously the 5 phases of the employee life cycle, but really focusing on the sustainability angle. So employees can come and go from organizations over the years, but how can we really maximize their time when they're at your organization, but also after they leave the organization, how you can get the most out of that. So let's jump straight into it. We've got 5 phases to cover today, and we'll pause at each phase to discuss each topic. So let's go on to phase 1, onboarding. So of course, onboarding, there are a lot of things happen before we actually onboard an employee, but we're going to start here at the onboarding phases. It's definitely where Sapling and Impraise can add the most amount of value to this conversation. So Agata, I'd love to start with you first in terms of the onboarding processes that you use at Bananatag. Could you share some of the insights that you already have in place?
Yeah, absolutely. So we implemented Sapling over a very quick period of time, and we launched it in January. And we designed a bunch of workflows that were a mix between a self-led and highly interactive with more than just the manager. We know from our own experiences that even if you have 100% of intention of spending all your time with a brand new employee that's yours, you still have a day job. And so this way we were able to get everyone to chip in and clearly set out the manager's expectations as well as the employee's expectations and have it a very community feel. We've had exceptional feedback around the process. So it was live in January. It was the first time we had a unified onboarding experience. We have multiple locations, different divisions, and it really gave all new employees, all the information they need in the first week to be able to start being effective in their respective jobs. So yeah, that's what we've done.
Awesome. And in terms of the access to the information, do they get that access before they even begin working so they can start to absorb information, or are they only able to get access to that once they begin?
Yeah, we give access. We do provide pre-boarding, which gives a lot of access around like our cultural norms, our principles, our vision and mission, a lot around the history of our company that's a little bit more detailed than we would put on our website. So there's some short videos from our 3 founders and like really kind of cornerstone memories for them, just for them to get like comfortable with seeing their images or like their persons as they walk around. For a new person, we've had a few kind of moments where people didn't know that someone was a founder in the organization because they're young, and yeah, they just like walk by and like, I don't know who you are, and he's like, I'm the CEO of the company. So we wanted to kind of prevent that from future interactions, and it's been really, really great. So we do give a level of access in advance, and it's completely voluntary.
Okay. And Jeff, I know that you've had in Atlassian, you guys have some pretty cool initiatives to get people integrated with the company as quickly as possible. Can you share some of those ideas and initiatives that you have from Atlassian?
Sure, yeah, happy to do it. I mean, I think of all the topics we'll cover today, this one is the most perfectly lined up to both Sapling and Impraise when I think about it, right? I usually view this continuum as from the offer stage through to being fully ramped in the job. And from the offer stage perspective, at Atlassian, we had an offer kit. We called it a new hire kit. And we sent it to anyone, anywhere in the world within 48 hours of getting a verbal offer. It was guaranteed to be in your hands. And this kit, which we literally designed from scratch, had a whole host of content in it. It had content that spoke to the history of the company. It spoke to our mission. It spoke to the values of the organization. But it had a whole bunch of other content in there. We had tattoos for the values that were temporary tattoos that people would use. We had Tim Tams for any of you chocolate junkies out there to reflect the Aussie heritage of the company. We actually did a pre-vacation for everyone before they started, where we actually paid for them to take a vacation before they joined the company to recharge. And that was in there for them on how to do that. It was $1,000 to go take a trip before you started, which again, tied to our values of build with heart and balance.
Mm-hmm.
We also made a donation through our charitable foundation to educate a child in Cambodia through a room to read. So it had a whole host of content in it that was meant to get you excited about the company that you were joining, and really make that first touch be a wow moment. And I used to laugh with Scott and Mike about it, that I probably should be labeled a profit center, because for the cost of that kit, I guarantee you we had a lot less back and forth negotiations, where you could imagine someone getting it at home and saying, do I really want to negotiate over that $1,000 and be a schmuck? And the person next to him would be like, are you kidding me? Take the job. What a killer company. Look at all this stuff they're sharing with us that you should be excited about. So kind of the earliest touch point was that. But I think the part to me that's really important, where both the technologies that are sponsoring us today come into play, is the Sapling bit absolutely gets the purity of creating an awesome experience at such a high intensity time of getting the right content and getting onboarded and access to systems. But we often forget about the onboarding side of getting you up to ramp, which is where we would use Impraise to help get folks get feedback in a timely manner, give feedback, and make sure in that first 90-day window they were rocking and rolling. So, think about all those rituals: pre-boarding, the actual time when you first start, and then putting a technology wrapper around it to really get people engaged. And honestly, part of our job is not just engaged, but up to speed, kicking butt in the job as fast as we can.
Yeah, I'd love to ask any three of you, actually, if you have any specific examples of benefits that you've obtained from having these processes in place. So while the excitement and the engagement is high, have you seen that value point delivered really quickly because the people feel already quickly integrated and are very clear on where they should be delivering value?
Yeah, so we have an interesting metric around engagement. So we track engagement through Culture Amp, and we did our first engagement survey in January. And so we had all the cohorts, and anyone that was onboarded pre this plan didn't have a strong engagement score compared to now people that did have this engagement or this onboarding plan. Their engagement is like significantly improved. It's like, I think it's about 15 points different, which is, correlates to like productivity and in turn turnover. So we've been able to even map it that directly.
Yeah. That's pretty important.
Yeah, I'd say the couple measures we looked at were offer acceptance rates and how much back and forth negotiation we had, which we could look at with each person pre and post putting in those offer packages. And we had a much more significant reduction in negotiations and having to change the offer position. And our offer rates also increased, although they were exceptionally high to begin with for a lot of the culture work we did. Yeah. But the best thing I look at is just time to ramp. Like, are we reducing the time in which both the new hire and the managers say they're ready to rock and roll? And we reduced that significantly, double digits in terms of reduction from just having a really good plan from the time of start through the first 90 days.
I think if I can add to that, we had multiple customers using Impraise, such as Bugaboo from the Beautiful Strollers, where they have a survey sent out the first week to the new employee, but also to the new manager, to just see if everything is aligned and if it is what they expected when they received and accepted the offer. And then a similar survey goes out after 60 and 90 days. And what they have seen is that the number of people that leave within the probation period out of their own movement, which are regrettable, has significantly gone down because people have a chance to speak their mind. And if it's not in line with what they thought it was going to be, then at least somebody knows about that and they can have an actual conversation about it.
Yeah, that's a really nice point there, making sure that the feedback loop is closed at all points, because as much as input is very important from people who are already within the organization, I think new hires have a very fresh perspective on the business and have no bias or history of legacy of what's gone bad or good in the company, so they can really offer insights that maybe others might not see for the first time.
Yes, and I think also at Impraise we also prepare the team for a new joiner. So we already have the ability to leave a message for somebody that's joining us. So they have a message board when they arrive, so they really feel welcomed. Yeah, I think that really helps.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can talk to the Impraise standpoint. We have, Jeff, you spoke a lot about mission, vision, and values, and there are a lot of like small tasks that they get assigned at the start to map to those values. So have you gone and introduced yourself to somebody outside of your department maybe, or setting someone up on a coffee date with the CEO so you can actually have that conversation and not randomly bump into them and ask them who they are or something like that. So it's very important, I think, and sometimes you have to encourage these habitual collisions, otherwise it doesn't necessarily happen on its own. But I definitely agree with all of your points. Does anyone have any additional onboarding insights that they want to share?
I just want to know if I can steal that phrase, habitual run-ins, as you had there. That's great. That's cool.
I've trademarked it, Jeff. You're going to have to pay me. All right, if there are no questions, we'll move on to the next phase and just some 3 quick takeaways here. So Agata, you touched on pre-boarding and making sure that they have everything they need. It's very clear what they need, and then setting those expectations. So, and those 30, 60, 90-day check-ins, you can understand clearly, have those expectations been met? Do we need to fix the process? Is there some gaps that we're not aware of? And then just resources so that they can spend the time when they have it to go through and find all the information they need to get going. All right, phase 2. So we're onboarded, we've started. What happens now once we're actually in the company? And the question here is, have you enabled your employee for success through tools, goals, and processes? So it's not just about giving them all the information we need, but perhaps what role can the manager play in this exact one? And Lisette, I'd love to start with you because I know you've spent a lot of time setting up these processes for customers that you've onboarded. Would you mind sharing some insights on how you've done that?
Yes, of course. So I think it's really important that you've taken this offer, you're excited about your new job, you've had your check-ins to make sure it is what you expected it to be. But then you also have to make sure that people know what is expected of them, because even the best person, the most experienced person in a new role doesn't always exactly know what is the priority they should be working on. So I think it's really important to set up one-on-ones at a regular cadence. So to make sure you are in touch quite often with your people. But also that during those one-on-ones, you make sure certain areas are always discussed. So not just the role, but also how do they feel in the company? Do they feel welcome? How is everything balanced, especially in these COVID-19 times? Having people work from the comfort or discomfort of their home. I think many of us are having kids around. So discussing also the human factors is really important. But then I think it's also important to log it somewhere. So the topics that you have discussed to follow up on in the next conversation, but also the goals. And then I'm not talking only about the performance goals, but also the personal development goals. If you hire someone who already states in the interview phase, I would like to become a sales lead within 2 years from now, then make sure that you set some goals together. Like, this is what you need to ramp up in this role. And after that, this is what I expect to see from a more senior salesperson. So I think you have to use the already existing tooling or acquire tooling that helps you to achieve those steps together.
Yeah, absolutely. Jeff, I know that you spoke a lot about mission, vision, and values before. Do you see a role of OKRs and company goals playing a part in this to create that clarity for someone when they start in a company? How can I be part of this company mission?
Yeah, I think you have to, from my experience being part of and then advising several companies that have really strong, sustainable, high-performing cultures, having that backbone of a clearly defined mission. And for those of you that are Simon Sinek fans of the Golden Circle, you get a sense of what that really means, of what's the real purpose of the organization. We then had a great ritual that started at Atlassian that I've built upon since then, called the Painted Picture, where you really get together and define what the next chapter of growth will look like across the various parts of your business and the folks that are impacted by your business, whether that be partners or customers or the people inside, with good measures of success along those to make sure you're making the right investments. But once you have that long-term vision, that next chapter of growth defined, having a really good set of values that are behaviorally based and defined that way becomes the way we'll work together with others to achieve that next chapter of growth, aka the painted picture, along the journey to hitting our mission. And that framework to me is super important for people to then have the context to figure out where their work fits in and how to set goals and whatnot. We could do a whole nother webinar on goals and all of that. OKRs or not. I'm actually not a fan of OKRs. We could debate that another time. I could tell you why. But regardless of that, I think people understanding what's the work they're going to go drive and why is super important. And Impraise was critical to this at Atlassian. I think I was one of your earliest customers, and we actually built some of the product, I think, in the early days together. But yes, we put in a couple key components that I think are worth mentioning. We put in something called Take 5, which was 5 questions in 5 minutes, with the idea being so much time is taken away from organizations being productive with this goal setting, feedback, and pay cycle. It's the cycle where we suck the most productivity out of organizations. So we wanted to embark on something that was lightweight but had the same impact and left time for people to go back to their jobs and really drive what they were here for. And the 5 questions we had were equally weighted around you and the manager. And they've had both self-reflection and feedback. So it was a super balanced power structure. And it had no text allowed whatsoever, which was great because most of the time people write up their feedback and then they send it. And then this conversation is, well, did you read it? Do you have any questions? So we actually don't create conversation. Yeah. We create paper trails, right? Yeah. And the value of that process was super powerful. We did it quarterly. And we were actually able to have people take notes when they saw their responses versus the managers to prepare for a lively conversation. But that quick quarterly pulsing was huge. And we combined it with a manager effectiveness survey that we did twice a year, where people gave feedback to their manager on the 8 elements we thought made an effective manager. So we had this really great system and rhythm around that. But what was most valuable to me was we then put a tool like Impraise in the hands of every person. It wasn't HR led, and I could go get feedback. I could share knowledge. I could drive my own learning with anybody that I wanted through the technology. So we really created a feedback and knowledge sharing culture that started with an HR rhythm, but then moved into the hands of the people inside the organization. And that combination of feedback, multi-directional, equally power-weighted, managers learning how to be better managers, and just a tool that allowed people to constantly share knowledge and grow themselves, created a sustainable system that we didn't have to drive any longer as the HR team, and became the backbone of a really strong learning culture. Yeah,
I really like the point that you made about a behavioral guide and a kind of matrix that people can find themselves in themselves. You don't have to determine exactly what you should be doing, but it's a guide to the values of the business. And that's super important, I think, when you're a new hire and then you're coming into this existing framework. How do I see myself within that framework? And it's really nice that those things are clearly defined. Agata, I don't know if you've had in Bananatag or any of your previous experience, have you got these similar processes in place?
Yeah, I can absolutely jump off of what you were just saying. So I joined Banatag 6 months ago, which has flown by. And one of the things that we're embarking on right now is actually doing that, which is taking this very traditional performance management process, which was completely disjointed, done inconsistently, and like exactly what you said, like a paper trail. And it was this, and what's interesting about Bananatag is their anniversaries, their higher anniversaries are very ceremonial and very near and dear. And so there was this like conflict of like this process and then this ceremony, and they just like never meshed. And so we're right now piloting a new performance management philosophy. We determined our philosophy by reading this book called How Performance Management is Killing Performance and What to Do About It. I've done the same project at 2 other organizations and worked with the executive team and senior leadership teams to really come up with a philosophy. And now we're taking that philosophy and putting it into the action through people. And so the first part of our pilot right now at Bananatag is we're piloting that employees lead their one-on-ones. And within that one-on-one, they ask for one specific area of I'm going to use the word performance. I know that's just like overkill, but that they want feedback on, so that they're really driving where they want improvement. Doesn't mean the manager can't give them feedback in general, but that there is a culture and a cultural norm to ask for feedback. The next evolution of that will be asking for feedback from a peer. We're right now in a pretty small pilot, so not everyone is in the tool, so you can't really ask. And then within that is like, what are the right one-on-one conversations? Because there's stuff that you just need to like just give updates on, and then it's like, here's the meaningful conversation we need to have for me to be effective in my job. So yeah, and we did something really similar both at Spence Diamonds and at Hootsuite to make those one-on-ones far more effective and the process far more effective. And yeah, so totally on board. I think that's. I love
the empowering of the individual, because I think, you know, the myth that the manager is the end-all solution to everything. We just put managers in an impossible situation, right? Most of them are learning in their chair. Most of them have a day job. They've got to run the team, set goals, recognize work. Oh, by the way, own development of all your people, et cetera. Like we have, and it's one manager to pick it, 5, 6, 8, 10 team members. We put them in an impossible position. Why not unleash individuals to own that and have tools in a way within a framework to improve themselves? It seems like a no-brainer. It's the way innovation happens. It's the entrepreneurial spirit. Yet we build these structures that restrict them and put the manager as the choke place. The manager has an important role. They just can't be the gatekeeper on all of this stuff, or it won't scale, especially in a rapidly growing work.
I would add to that is like, not all employees are equal. Like you might have someone that has a really fast career trajectory and someone that maybe doesn't want to have a career trajectory at all. And so when it's stuck at the manager, there's this like default for managers to treat all employees equally. But when it's no longer the manager's responsibility to like own that process, own the feedback, then the employees will ask for the level of what they need in different parts of their tenureship. So it reduces this random, like, I don't even know what the bias is, but it's like all things equal to all people. And that's just an impossible rule.
How do you go about balancing business value that business has to happen, and then supporting the people and their wants and their needs for perhaps career trajectory and wanting to move quicker? Because at the risk of talking about millennials, I know that there is a very different workforce mentality over the age groups. So how do you balance that want as an individual versus the business needs?
I think it's also thinking ahead. So as a manager, or nowadays you're more of a coach, I think it's really important that you also listen clearly why somebody wants to achieve something, have good discussions, and also debate if it's a good way to go for someone. But to give you an example, I came from a training background, moved into customer success without having that experience before, because they saw things that were similar in my previous roles. But now, for example, I'm learning JavaScript to become a web developer, which has nothing to do with customer success. But still, Impraise is supporting me in this because they do see a future where I know the tool from a customer success perspective. I know the people that use the tool or could use the tool. And I also want to improve the tool by being a developer. So it's not directly applicable to my current role, but luckily my manager sees that it will have an impact on the future of the company.
Well, you just impressed me with how broad your capabilities are versus me, but that's impressive.
I have my moments.
I guess the thing I would tell you, I don't want to steal too much thunder on the next question, because I think there's a bridge here around, you know, how do you balance it with the career path discussion? So I'll wait to go deeper there. But the one thing I would tell you is I'm always a believer that the first foundation in any process is crush the job you're in. I don't even want to talk about your development till I've given you feedback around the job you're in, and we're sure you're able to crush that. And so I want to make sure that's where it needs to be, and then worry about the development side. So it's sort of the earning the right for the personal development from that standpoint. And by the way, there is personal development in your current role doing it right. So that's sort of the foundational piece to hit. And I like to make that Take 5 process for us. The power weight was equally balanced 100%. And the purpose of that was to talk about this notion of You give feedback to the manager so the manager can be better. You take feedback so you can develop. So there's development individually of the two people. There's also development in the partnership, because that partnership has to develop in order for success to happen in that team cohort. So that's usually where I would start before I push the lever much more on the future personal and career development.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to quickly summarize basically what you guys, feel free to interrupt me if I missed any of the points, but very much giving the guardrails, but opening it up to be employee driven, to have that two-way conversation and supporting, but also allowing them to develop themselves. And Jeff, you were saying crushing your role first, deliver the value that you were brought in to do, create a sense of belonging and development there, and then move on to the next conversation, which is how can we talk about career trajectory and expanding your knowledge within the organization. Cool. All right. Well, I think you already started on the next point, so I'm going to go straight into it, Jeff. It's development. So I don't think these are very clean phases. They definitely go across the board. So we've put them into 5 phases, but from performance to development, and they are continuous at all points. So from the question. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the first step for this, which builds on what you said before around personal development, where people go and at what pace, the missing step I typically see is organizations do not do org design and workforce planning well. And it's not tied to that kind of painted picture concept. Whether you use that ritual or not, you have a vision of where the organization's going. And most of the time we skip that structure and framework step and we just go right to, what level is a job and what do people want to get better at and where do they want to go? And whereas that's important, I think we often miss the frame that we need in order to guide people. Like how many of what types of roles are going to be possible inside our organization is going to be set by that strategic business frame of what the next chapter of growth is. So that's always where I start from doing that. And that does create that alignment. If we don't have the business opportunity and you have a personal career goal, they just may not line up. And we sort of need to know that and plan for that. The second thing I typically do is something we actually did at Atlassian. We called it Career Compass, where we actually had every role in the organization leveled, whether you do that with Radford or whoever you want to use and go through your own process to structure jobs. There's some natural leveling to your roles. And we published the levels of every job in the company by every function with some pretty simple rules that most of the time when you want to make a move, like from training to CS or to coding for web, right? You typically would go laterally or a step back to learn that function. And the purpose of opening up all of those paths and showing that to people was, 1, to set the expectation, 2, to give them the freedom and license to say, connect with the people in the organization in those roles to learn more about what they do, see if you can shadow them, then come back after you've sort of looked at that with your manager and let's sort of have a sense of what capabilities you have and where your gaps are. But opening up that playing field so people really understand it was really super important for us to get people to look at moving around the organization, where again, HR wasn't the ones driving it. We just had to build a framework and turn people loose.
Yeah.
I love what you say there about a framework, because I think it's really important that people also know what is expected in their role. And of course, you have an idea if you go into marketing as a product marketeer, you kind of know what you're going to do. And same for me as a customer success manager. But I really like that I have clarity on the competencies that go with my role. So I know what I'm supposed to be good at. For example, being as Dutch as I am, I never score really high on one of our things I have to be able to do, and that's tact. But on the other hand, I score really high on communication. But at least I know where my blind spots are, and they're not that blind anymore. So I also know if I want to grow, these are the things I can work on. And others in the organization also see my competencies in Impraise and give me specific role-based feedback, which is a lot more valuable than just a random good job. So yeah, that helps.
Well, you're right. Like we used Impraise once we launched that Career Compass. And what was interesting is I thought we would have to set up a lot of 360s where we set up the process. But what was more powerful was once people had those conversations and they were on the Impraise platform, they could ask people, hey, how am I doing at this skill? right? Or they could ask people in a new job, do you think I have the capability to learn X? Could I connect with you on that and have you share some of your knowledge? So it became the way people connected and self-directed a sense of where they were and how they could develop, which again is much more scalable, similar to the idea of the manager being the bottleneck. I don't want my HR team to be the bottleneck. I just want to turn people loose so that they can solve those issues themselves.
Absolutely. I actually wouldn't take any credit for this for Bananatag, but our 3 founders, so the business has been around for over 10 years, and they were always very progressive around learning and investing in our people from a developmental side. And I think the term they said even recently was like, even in tough times, our worst investment would be not investing in our people. And from an alignment standpoint, we've gotten more and more better at showing people where the growth is. We don't have a painted picture very far out. We're growing so rapidly that the market around us is changing. So we've started to talk about things in 18 months, 18-month trajectories. And so when employees want to talk to us about their career, and they're saying, in 6 years, it's like, we don't know what 6 years from a Bananatag will look like, but we can talk 18 months out. Like, we know this much for sure. That's our plan. And when we've had to course correct, we talk about it at town halls. We have town halls every month, and we have a lot of transparency. And we've seen people quickly be like, that's of interest, and like immediately change. And the beauty of that is that A, it supports our business, but B, it doesn't require HR. It's a conversation and becomes a lot more natural. And then learning and development becomes a way of our culture, a norm for our organization. Now, there's other ways of learning and courses and stuff like that. And we're structuring a process to support that and be in alignment. But we're right now talking about 18 months at a time, which has really helped structure that kind of like, what is my passion versus how does it align to the business? And when you give that 18 months, immediately people can be like, okay, I'm clear where we're going. And the noise of like, I want to maybe change careers completely goes away, because we're not in a position to do that based on our size and where we're evolving from a market standpoint. So absolutely support everything you've said.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think from any startup perspective, you don't have the luxury of a long-term plan, because you are really working to 1 year at a time to report back to your investors. And so very much at Impraise, we value the honest conversations. While they're sometimes really difficult to have, it removes all the ambiguity of what might be coming, what could happen to you, especially in these times when you're already feeling the pinch of what is going to happen with the market. Am I going to lose my job? Are we going to survive the next 12 months? It's very nice to have that open communication, and I can either start planning or making changes if I need to, for myself and for the business. I'm wondering if all 3 of you could talk to any really difficult conversations that you might have had as it relates to personal development versus business development.
I definitely have had conversations back at Booking where I was heading up a team of 18 solution architects, basically, and where everybody wanted to be the next team lead. They knew I was going to move on to the next role, and literally every one-on-one I had after that was about, can I replace you? And clearly there were 3 to 4 people that actually really had everything it took. They ticked all the boxes, but then it's also about how they are with their colleagues. So do they live and embody the values of the company? And then there were also a few people that spoke up quite late in the process, but that were actually quite a good fit because of previous gained skills in other roles. So we had to have quite some difficult conversations, but what really helped there for me, we had the use of Impraise there, and I recommended everybody who wants to apply to ask for feedback from X number of people to rethink, is this the right role for me? And in a lot of these cases, people received feedback from their own peers and cross-lateral conversations with other people that maybe it wasn't the right step or not the right time for them to move into that new role.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of resolved itself by making people use the tooling that they had in place.
Yeah.
Yeah, I looked to the side because I was like, oh, I have a lot of difficult conversations. It's a name of the game, but there's one that comes to mind a little more clearly than others, which was we had, and it wasn't it's not at Bananatag, but it was at Spence, and we had an employee who was an exceptional, one of the best salespeople we ever had been with the company for a long time, and wanted to be a store director. And there was like few levels in between. And the competencies of like the best salesperson and the best manager of like a multi-million-dollar store is very varying wide. And so the conversations was like, just like, put me in, coach, let me try, I'll show you. And then, unfortunately, there was a moment where we actually had to do that. We weren't in a position where we had a talent pool to bring in someone. The on-ramping of that role was really hard. So we put someone in that wasn't prepared, and then having to provide that feedback and that development all the time for a long period of time was probably really difficult. And the learning from that was like, if you have critical roles, have a talent pool, have a succession plan. And even if the succession plan is internal, like, start having those conversations early to do that. I unfortunately joined right when this was all happening. So it wasn't something I think I could have prevented, but it was definitely some really tough conversations around where people stand when it comes to new roles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd say you hit a couple key pieces. I love the idea of crowdsourcing the feedback, because then people can see the breadth of that, whether it's by their peers or who the customer set would be of the role. I have seen that, unfortunately, other times go the other way, where the peer group says they're great for it, and I'm like, no, sorry, you're still not. So let's tackle that head on. So I think the candor side of that becomes super important in those conversations. One tool I've found in having this particular conversation around two angles. One is the high potential overachiever that wants a stretch job, which is partly what you were just articulating. I really make sure they understand the likelihood of what the first 6 and 12 months will be. Right, I've watched more organizations take a top performer and they put them in a new job, and you're like, you're going to be on the low end. Are you comfortable with underperforming, not being a top performer because you're stretched in a job? Are you willing to make that trade-off and make sure they're calibrated so they don't get disenfranchised? Because there are folks that are just not calibrated on, what do you mean everything I touch won't turn to gold instantly? So I like to make sure we sort of have that contract up front. The other tool I would tell you that I found super helpful when people want to move into a role and feel like they're ready, I like to find the person that I think is the best role model of that, and ask the individual to assess themselves against that person, not against the role. Because sometimes I think they look at a job description or whatnot, and people can sort of interpret that a little bit. But like, here's the experience set, not just the job deliverables, but the experience set and capabilities of someone that was wildly successful. And that may become a person, if they're inside, that I can actually reach out to say, give this person honest feedback as well, but at least have people sort of profile match against more than a job description, but against an actual person that's crushing it in that job. And I tend to see people get a little more metered in sort of their sense of where they sit, without the manager having to be the person that's, viewed as the bad guy, so to speak, in terms of saying, here's where your gaps are. And they're, again, a little more empowered to be doing that self-assessment, which allows them to accept the outcome a little better.
Yeah, I really like that one. And it also removes, it makes self-awareness is really not something that a lot of people are good at. So taking that step back and not just ticking off a job description checklist, like, yes, I can create this and this and this, but actually identifying with soft skills that maybe aren't so obvious or necessarily on a job description. So thank you guys. I'm just going to move us on because I know we've got a couple more phases to cover and we might circle back on this one. So just the key takeaways here. So making sure that you have those difficult conversations and identifying people's career aspirations before it gets too hard and uncomfortable. And then the training. So maybe shadowing, as Jeff has just mentioned, about identifying a role modeling so people can reflect and see themselves in that role. And then the second to last phase, engagement and recognition. Now, we've definitely already touched on this. And while we very much talk about investing in people from a developmental point of view, I think there's another angle which we could definitely be investing our people in, and that's recognition. So I'd love to start off with you, Agata. I know previously in our conversation you mentioned some rituals that you've had in Bananatag with Muffin Mondays and formal touch points where people know that they have these chances to recognize each other. Could you expand on that?
We're really fortunate that part of our culture really cares about people. Like that's really deeply rooted. And so on employees' ceremony of their anniversary, which we call Bananniversaries, the manager or a peer will tell them like all the cool things that they've accomplished and like why they're thankful for them to be a colleague. Like it gets really personal and really sweet. We also like really celebrate people's birthdays, and we do a lot of recognition in like immediate as fast as possible. So we've always had Muffin Monday, which was like company-wide stand-ups in our respective offices. And during that time, it's like, what are we going to do for the week? And then if anything really needed to be celebrated, like so-and-so closed a really great deal, it was like right there and immediate. And it was like the power of words had a lot of weight for us, or has a lot of weight for us. And now, because of COVID, we're on twice a week on muffin meetings, so Mondays and Fridays. And Fridays is really around a recap, any feedback, anything we need to do. And that's another spot where we really get to celebrate one another for like accomplishments or anything of that nature. So we do have a lot of like informal stuff. And then we bring those into town halls as well. And we use them as a format to spotlight aligned cultural pieces. So if someone takes a risk and fails, but like now we've learned something as a business, we want to like spotlight that as like a really good thing. And so we provide recognition in that way. And we're small enough and we have a relatively young workforce. So that is probably the right thing. I wouldn't recommend doing that in every company, not every person or organization. That would be like an applicable one, but it's really helped on both the engagement side because people want to be the one that's spotlighted, and secondly, it is a subconscious way of us communicating. Yep, this type of work is actually aligned to where we're going. So it's multifaceted.
Yeah, absolutely. I like the also identifying failures as learnings and making sure that is acknowledged and not kind of brushed under the rug as something bad, and everybody can learn from each other's mistakes. And so that's a really nice, we do something sometimes at Impraise called a failure fiesta, where we discuss the failures and all openly kind of sit around and laugh a little bit, cry a little bit. But at the end of the day, we've all learned from each other's mistakes. So it's quite a nice kind of almost a therapeutic session to acknowledge that we are humans and you don't always have to be perfect in every situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'd say the one thing you mentioned that I'd build on is like I believe the cornerstone of driving this, if you're going to recognize, you have to recognize the what and the how. So to really make your culture stick, you got to equally weight values and impact. So I would encourage people to build that balance into whatever recognition programs they have. I believe peer-to-peer recognition programs have the greatest ROI of any spend in compensation and benefits. Historically, it always has. And so you can design really cool peer-to-peer programs. We had a kudos program at Atlassian, and what was most valued was the handwritten note on cards that people got that stuck up on their desks. We had walls of those where people could post them in the office and sort of relive the moment. But it was the fact that we asked people to recognize what the person did and what value they demonstrated. So we were reinforcing both at the same time. And it touched on the last piece, I'd say, which is it has to be personal and genuine if you want to drive the engagement side. And so the fact that it was a note written to me by someone added a ton of value. And you can do that in every bit of reward you do. At Atlassian, when we gave people equity awards, we actually shipped them a surprise kit to their house. And in that kit had a handwritten letter on rag paper you might use for a wedding or something with a frame so people could frame those. That was specifically to your point of like, what have people done well on their anniversary? Like same idea, like what have you done? What am I most proud of? How you've personally touched your team or the company. And with that, we probably went a little bit overboard, but we had a bottle of champagne in there. We had a confetti popper, chocolates so that you could share the celebration with the people around you when you opened it, and a dinner for two sort of gift cards. So the celebration moment lived on, but it was the intimacy of opening that and that whole experience we created. People talked more about that than the equity they got. It still amazes me to this day that people have those letters. So whatever you're going to do to drive engagement and recognition, spend the time and a little bit of money to make it personal and genuine and intimate. If you do those things, you'll get engagement from people on the things you care most about.
Yeah, I love that. And I also really like that, Jeff, you said you can spend the money, but you don't have to spend money. You wrote the handwritten was
Totally.
so even though the budgets might have been slightly bigger at Atlassian, there are so many things, the genuine things that you can do to recognize people, and that definitely carries so much more weight than something that is just a voucher that anybody can get off the internet. So I really like those examples. Lisette, I wonder if you've got any specific examples of recognition programs that you've seen in companies you've worked with.
Yes, what I really like at the current company at Impraise is that we have a Slack connection. So when I give somebody praise, I can choose if it's publicly shared or not on the Slack channel. It's a specific recognition channel, so it's not like you constantly see praise, because that would be a big distraction, but you can choose to read it. I also really like the point that Jeff made about it doesn't have to be really expensive. So today I received a postcard, for example, from my manager, just letting me know he thought it was impressive how, like many of us, I'm a mom right now to a newborn and a toddler, and I'm their colleague, and I'm so many other things at once, teaching from home. But just the fact that he took the effort to get a card, write it personally to me, to acknowledge that I'm doing something well, that makes a big difference to me.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know if I'm jumping the gun slightly here. I'm going to move quickly to the ambassador phase so we can give people on the call a chance to ask some questions. But I think it's a really nice segue here into what is that final phase, which has been an ambassador and all of these experiences, right from onboarding through to recognition. How have those experiences built up to make employees, even after they leave your organization, an ambassador? And will they continue to refer people? Because, I mean, as we all know, when we go to buy anything, we'd rather hear it from a friend if they've done it before instead of just, randomly doing it. So I'd love to hear from you, Agata, if you've had any. I think you've mentioned the term Boomerang Employees to me, and why that's so significant and important.
Yeah, I think I could spend like a whole hour talking about this one topic, but I'll try to get to the point. I think everything you do from the time you're in a candidate experience right to the last day has an impact on someone's experience. And while it sucks when people leave, sometimes it's just not the right fit, the right role. There might not be enough growth for them. And we've had actually, I've actually been fortunate to see this in the last two organizations, but Bananatag as well, where we had employees leave and then realize, wait, it isn't that much better out here. I kind of want to get back and come back. And it really, there's two things that happen with that. One, you have immediate, someone being productive in the workforce, because there's no training. They know the company. Even if there was a period of time, they're starting ahead. The second, anyone that might have been even considering looking externally start to be like, wait, maybe there is something really special here. And it makes people pause. We're very fortunate to have very, very low turnover and a very clear, kind of what we expect. But that emotional contract is even deeper the second round, and for the colleagues around them. So it really shines to us in terms of people leaving, and then people that leave that know our product, they can bring. May they not use our product internally, they can at least provide it as a recommendation in other organizations, because we use it well internally. They're like, oh, I know what really good internal communication looks like, and they can recommend Bananatag as a potential product. So
nice. I really like that emotional contract term that you use. It's not written, you never see it, but it definitely is binding, and you feel it heavily as an employee and an employer.
Yeah.
Jeff,
I'd say just a couple quick things. I know you want to get to questions. I'd start with offboarding is key. We so often forget about how we manage that process. I know I spend tons of time with the Sapling folks on how strong they do that from a process perspective in the technology, but everybody's watching how you offboard people, thinking it could be them someday. So that is your brand in motion. And yet we don't really spend a lot of time on that because it's an uncomfortable space and we don't always know how to deal with it. but doing that really well, I would say spend some time looking at your offboarding process is important. Fundamentally, celebrate their new gigs. Like, I'm amazed at how many companies don't want to do that. And what I will usually tell people, and I've done this since my GE days and all the way through, that's your brand in motion. When those people go get other jobs, celebrate it, right? There's nothing wrong with that. The fact that they got another great job is because of the awesome brand they built for themselves working at your company. So it reinforces that value proposition. And we don't want to hold people if their dreams can be met elsewhere. So I think it creates a healthy sense of there's not an issue going on and whatnot. And companies always grapple with that. And the last thing I think you already hit, which is alumni programs. And at SuccessFactors, we did this really well. We actually had dedicated team of folks that ran an alumni program to share information, reach out to those people, know specifically why they left, and time when we reached back out to see how many boomerangs we could get, which is like, hey, did you get what you wanted there? And if you did, awesome. You were great here. Who do you know that would be great to join us? And if not, let's open that door for you to come back, because it is hard for people to ask sometimes to come back. There's just an ego in that. So if you make that easier, your chance to get some of those people to come home again will be much greater.
Yeah. It's a really nice one. Removing the barriers, even though they never say it, there is definitely that barrier there. You know, I left on my own accord. Why should you let me back? It's a really nice one. Lisette, I don't know if you have anything to add to that. Otherwise, I might take a couple of crowd questions.
No, I would say let's move on to the questions. There are quite a nice bunch in there.
Cool. I've received a separate summary, so I'm just going to dive straight in. One of those questions was, how do you spot potential in employees without them actually putting their hand up to want to go up that trajectory? Agata, I don't know if you have a...
Yeah, I've definitely faced this a few times, and I will maybe say the elephant in the room. Sometimes women will tend to sit back a little bit and wait to be tapped on the shoulder. And I think there's like tons of articles around like, yeah, women like to be at like 90% there versus guys will be like 40 to 50. And I'm just gonna, just say, I'll try. So one of the things that we do differently and some of the philosophies I believe in is having those conversations on a very ongoing basis. So it doesn't feel like you need to tap someone on the shoulder. It's more like, we've been talking about this and this is where you are. And it's a very equalizing conversation on both sides. And some people just need to be reminded around where they are and being able to get them to also agree. I also seen people that have had extreme potential and just where they were in their personal lives just didn't allow for them to be at the right time to be able to explode. I remember a woman that was, had 2 babies. Her mom recently had been diagnosed with cancer. Her father had passed away 6 months before. And so her personal life was really turbulent, but she had every ounce of potential to be a superstar. It just wasn't the right time for her. But that open conversation created the ability to give her small pieces of what will light her up and make her feel fulfilled in the workplace and supported without being put on the back burner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. That's a really awful circumstance that poor lady was in. But having those honest conversations, I think, one, builds the trust in the employee relationship to let them know we're listening to you even though you have a tough time, and also remind them that even though they're going through a tough time, they're not going to get fired. They're not any worse at their job. They're just having a tough time. So. They're
having a tough go, yeah. And that allows that when they're ready, they can be like, I know I got this. Mm-hmm. And you can then let them, go.
Yeah. Jeff, I don't know if you've got anything to add to that, because you talked about a little bit about matrices on the kind of having where you can go, but what about the silent ones who have great potential but don't necessarily say it?
Yeah, I think the best, first you have to have that system that allows people to learn and experience different pieces. And we've talked about lots of the pieces in a system that will create that. Data, right? You've got to have good data. You've got to be able to see what's the accomplishment rate of that person. What are they doing in terms of learning activities? How are they participating in whatever your chat tools are and things like that. So there are technologies out there now that are really heavy AI driven that will bring you some of that data to make a more robust sense of potential, not just the person raising their hand. But you will get people to more raise their hand through some of these other things we've talked about gentle ways for them to learn or job shadow or get feedback from others to gain confidence.
Yeah.
But I would say the data side is going to be super key for you to proactively see those people.
Yeah, absolutely. And nowadays we have a whole plethora of options to capture that data. So there isn't really an excuse in terms of how to go about capturing that data in the first place. Okay, I'm going to take another question, which was, Lisette, which I'm going to ask you. Have you seen any mistakes that companies have made with onboarding that have gone wrong?
Yes, I think especially when there's an assumption that somebody has to be thrilled to be part of a certain company, things can go south. There was this time where Booking could pick out of 400 people for every job. Literally anything they posted would get at least 400 reactions, and then the person that did get the gig was sort of expected to be in heaven and to be super excited. Obviously it's cool to be there, but it's a job, and people also have other things happening outside of that. So I think it's really important to don't overestimate the brand name, because there was a time where people would join the company there and they would stay, like myself, 6 to 10 years. But then there was also a whole group that left within a year because it just wasn't as exciting as it was promoted to be. So Jeff was talking earlier about this amazing package, but then you also have to make sure that the actual job is matching that awesome package. So that for us was back then quite a difficulty. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. Anyone adding to that? No? Cool. And I have one last question that I don't know, Jeff, if you want to answer, but we're just on time. So the question was, why don't you like OKRs?
Well, I'll give you my 2-minute diatribe. One, I think Google's probably the world's best PR spin machine on HR activities. So the concept that everything Google touched is gold, I think, is inaccurate. So I'll start there, and a lot of it's marketing spend. But specifically to the OKRs, I believe that you set commitments, not goals. And I think language matters, and a commitment is what I'm going to deliver. It doesn't mean I always get there, but I want to set that mentality of achievement to that. That's really important. And fundamentally, OKRs have a philosophy that say it's hard to know what we're going to do, and we may not get there. So 70% score is green. And I'm not a believer in that. If my son came home from college with a C-, we'd be having a different conversation. So I just don't like the philosophy behind it and some of what it implies from a philosophy perspective. The idea of having goals and what you're going to do and a measure, love it. So SMART goals, yes. OKRs, not so much.
Yeah, great summary. It was tough to summarize in 2 minutes, but anyway, I want to thank you all for joining me. It has been just a little bit over time and plenty of questions. And thank you for those on the line. Bessie has just shared a small feedback survey. So if there are any topics that you want us to cover next time or any pieces of feedback you'd like to share with us, please do pop it in that feedback and we'll do what we can to rectify that for next time. So thank you, everyone. I'm going to end the webinar now and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Thanks very much.
Bye.